Thank you, Corinne. My father, Robert Lemire, liked nothing more than to reminisce about his childhood in the city of Lowell, and especially about his high school friends. I remember their names, if only because they are delightfully alliterative. Tappy Tapitzeris, Titus Lemiritis, Minnie Mavrides, and Gugu Aslanian are the names I recall best. I must admit, however, that perhaps because of the abundance of alliteration, I always assumed my father was making up these names. After all, one of his favorite activities when I was a child was to take my brother and me to a place we called Upside Down Land. This was a world that could only be accessed when my father would get home from work. He would get down on his hands and knees in our front hall, and my brother and I would climb on top of his back and drape our heads over his sides so that the three of us could have a little chat upside down. In Upside Down Land, you had to say everyone's name backwards. My brother Bo became Ab, I became Azil. Dad did not remain Dad, that would not have been much fun, instead becoming Trebor. Well, for the past few years, my father's memory has been disappearing. So in preparing for my journey back to Lowell, I was forced to turn to the internet to see what I could learn about his high school days. Imagine my surprise when I found out that Tappy Tapitzeris and the others are real people. It's been a joy to learn that my father remembered these folks not only because of their wonderful names, but because they were heroic figures to him. Now they are to me as well. Tappy was George Tapitzeris' nickname. The 1949 yearbook where I made this discovery lists his interests as science club, sports, and collecting records. He and my father's friendship might have been through Tappy's brother Stephen, who played varsity football with my father in 1946 and 1947. Tappy, George, graduated from high school in 1949, and as many of you know, became superintendent of the Lowell Public Schools, where he is remembered for implementing school desegregation. He will forever be named along with people like Paul Songus and Ann Wang for making a huge and positive impact on the Lowell area, and I had the great pleasure of meeting that very wonderful man last night. Titus Lemiritis also graduated from Lowell High School in 1949. Despite being only 5'5", he was larger than life on the football field. With only 4 seconds to go and Lowell trailing in the 1948 Thanksgiving Day football game against Lawrence, Lemiritis scored his third touchdown of the game, tying the score 19-19. Yes, he made all of the touchdowns. With 16,000 screaming fans watching, he managed to kick the ball through the goal post, securing the win by 1 point. I was thrilled to find a photograph in Titus Lemiritis' recently published autobiography of my father celebrating with him in the locker room. Minnie Mavrides was born Menil Mavrides. I'm guessing his nickname was meant as a joke. Menil was 6'2" and weighed 235 pounds. My father had the pleasure of playing alongside him in the high school Gator Bowl game in Jacksonville, Florida. After graduating from Lowell, Minnie played a significant role in Notre Dame's victory at the Rose Bowl, his sophomore year of college. By the time he graduated, he was ranked #1 in the NCAA for kick scoring. Minnie Mavrides didn't stop there. He moved on to the NFL, where he played for the Philadelphia Eagles. These young men, my father among them, were only a few of the over 1,400 athletes who played football under a coach whose name, also alliterative, is storied. I'm talking, of course, about Ray Riddick. This is where, for me, the story of my father's young adulthood gets very interesting indeed. I know I don't need to say much about Riddick's celebrated career. His presence is still felt here in Lowell, where the field house and a scholarship are named in his honor. What I know about Riddick, I read in Lemiritis' autobiography, where he's described as a third parent to all of the kids who played for him. His greatest gift, Lemiritis explains, was pointing the kids in the right direction. Lemiritis goes on to cite a Yale football coach who said of Riddick, quote, "As a coach, Riddick was also a teacher, and a teacher affects eternity. No one can tell where the influence stops," end quote. There is no doubt that Ray Riddick served as my father's third parent. At a time when Yale University had a Catholic quota, in other words, there was a limit on the number of Catholic students they would admit, Riddick didn't hesitate to bring my father to the Yale football coach's attention. Yale led to the Navy and then Harvard Business School, after which, as you heard, my father worked in investment banking, eventually starting Lemire & Company, his own financial consulting company. When my brother was diagnosed with dyslexia in the 1970s, my dad spent the rest of his career building a company that continues to make diagnostic and remedial software for dyslexic children and adults. You see, he had learned two things from Ray Riddick. The first is that education comes before all else, and it must be accessible for everyone. It is for his founding of Lexia Learning Systems and its presence in over 1 million schools that my father has the great fortune of being recognized today as one of Lowell High School's distinguished alumni. The second thing my father learned from Ray Riddick was an abiding love of sport. Even as our family struggled with dyslexia and my father's career took him in surprising directions, football was there for him. He transitioned to rugby, founding the United States Rugby Foundation in 1963 and playing into his 40s. The USRF is still going strong, and today there are over 2,200 rugby clubs in the United States. As the Yale coach said of Riddick, no one can tell where the influence stops. I know from my father's experiences that children in communities like Lowell grow up embracing educational opportunities, hard work, diversity, and the joy of a game well played. You treasure the Titus Plumeritis and the Minnie McGrady's in your lives. You appreciate the Tappy Tappetzeris and the Ray Riddicks teaching you on and off the field. For these reasons, I know you will flourish as my father flourished, with Lowell as your springboard. On behalf of the entire Lemire family, thank you for the great honor of including my father among Lowell High School's distinguished alumni. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next presenter is